they'll watch later. So we'll record this for them and go from there. So it's my privilege to introduce Reverend Brit Bolerjack. She is small but mighty, a powerhouse of energy. Those curls are the power flowing from her head, right? So I don't know when I first met Brit. I don't know, somewhere maybe in Oklahoma City. We had some fun encounters, ironically, also in London. That was fun. Met over there, had some students. So, but Brit is, I think, associate pastor, still at Oklahoma City First. I'm not sure the exact title, but one who cares about God and all things Christian, and especially as a passion, comes straight from the Bible, from Genesis 1, I would argue, to Revelation 21, that we are to be good stewards of God's creation. So, Brit, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. Maybe do a better, more fleshed out introduction of who you are. And if you want to introduce your husband and your chickens, you can. And that'd be great. And oh, by the way, more folks are joining us. That's going to happen. Folks who, so Colin, welcome. Sorry about my cancellation. I apologize. Colin is from Redding, California, via Washington, via Northern Ireland, via Manchester. So, it's all good. You probably know Brit already. So anyway, go ahead, Brit, tell us some more about yourself. And Colin, I'm sorry about canceling and re-upping. I had issues with my phone. So here we are. Thanks, Brit.
Yeah, so I'm Brit Bolerjack. I'm the college and community pastor at Oklahoma City First Church of the Nazarene. I'm actually working on a transition next year to the college and creation pastor. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like. But we've already.
You're creating a college? You're creating a college?
No, well, no.
Oh, that's my old dad. That's my dad humor.
I have a lot of ideas about classes that SNU should offer, and they just keep not taking.
There you go.
So,
creation college. Just go both ways.
Yeah. So I have thought about some sort of alternative seminary hosted from my living room, but Corona. So what are you gonna do?
Alas.
Yes. So I live with my husband, 5 housemates, and 12 chickens in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, on a third of an acre. So it's a double lot. If you're kind of keeping track of like city lots, it's a double lot. We have a 1,500 square foot garden and some kind of different things happening in our house, and we do a lot of recycling and stuff sharing. We, co-own a mower with 3 of our neighbors, that kind of thing. So we're trying to figure out what it looks like to live on less square footage per person, less resources, just trying to live as lightly on the planet as possible. And I'll kind of get into that here in a minute in my presentation. I actually feel terrible for Caleb because he's probably seen the first 15 minutes of this presentation like 8 times, because I kind of feel
that's why I'm here, because it's so good.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, because I really want you guys to know where I'm coming from, and what that kind of looks in my life, looks like in my life. So hello, Ron, joining us. And it was just really nice to hear. I'm curious to hear from the Tedders how you're related to Roland. Are you related to Roland Tedder, maybe?
That'd be the son.
Ah.
And you know Libby at all? Libby Tedder? She's a pastor. Well, not Tedder anymore. I forget her married name. Hugus. Libby Hugus.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to know her. She's great. They're in Wyoming, right? Tedder? No. Yeah, Wyoming.
Pastoring and worshiping community for PCUSA and Casper. That's Libby and Jeremy, and then Roland and Ashley are with Breakpoint Community in KC. Wesleyan community. Yeah.
I feel like they sound like my kind of people. I'll have to friend them on Facebook.
Yeah. If you like Roland, you really like Libby. Put it that way.
I'm in the kind of Nazarene bubble where you just randomly friend other Nazarene pastors on Facebook, and we're all Nazarene pastors, so we accept each other, right? I don't know.
You get a whole Libby. She'd love to connect with you, I'm sure.
Yeah. So awesome. Well, it's nice to kind of meet a few of you and see again a few of you. I think Colin, we're Facebook friends, but I don't know if we've met in person very many times. But yeah, so should I just go ahead and get started? But I'm not 100% sure how to.
Go for it. We might have random folks joining us because of my poor organizational skills or technology. So go for it.
Let's see. I've never done this in a window.
You present now, then you share your screen or share a slide. It was easier.
Well, Chrome does not have permission to share my screen. Okay, hold on one second. Sorry.
That's okay.
Da-da-da. Okay, sorry, just give me 1 second. I've never used this app before, so let's see. Can't share my screen. System preferences. Open system preferences. Okay, sorry. Da-da-da-da-da. Oh, it's because it's recording? Oh, I may have to log out and log back in. Is that terrible?
No, I'm surprised it's making you do that. You should be able to present, it's recording. Usually you just hit on the present now, and then it says share your screen. Is that being mean to you?
Okay, let me try one more time. A window. Okay, share. Are you guys?
It's working.
Something? Okay, I'm presenting my screen.
So the challenge is you probably won't be able to see us, but we can see you and your slides. So
okay, so then maybe just holler at me if someone has a question, or write down your question. We can get to it at the end. My kind of thought for this is, I'd really love to just present for like 20 minutes and then hear feedback and ideas from you guys, because really we're just scratching the surface in the kind of time frame that we have, and I know that you will have as many or way more ideas than I am presenting to you here. So it will feel like I'm going really fast through this, and I'm probably even going to skip a few slides just because we got started a little late.
But it all sounds great, so go for it, Brit. That'll be great.
If I hit present on this, is that bad? Tell me if you see.
Nope, we're still here, and it's getting, it's great on our end.
Okay, great.
It's black right now, but it's thinking.
Okay. So this is me and my husband. We're both pastors, both at OKC First. Big fan of him, obviously. And when I was 5, my family moved to Seattle from Kansas. And it was kind of a rough start. I don't know if you know, but one of you are from Washington, so you'll know the weather's kind of damp. And it took a lot of getting used to, especially for my parents. They both kind of went through some depression that first year. And I had a few of these like really tall Washington style like trees, evergreen trees that grew in the median across from my house. And I kind of learned as a kid who was like, sort of nervous about conflict, that I could kind of escape my life by crawling up these trees. And so I spent a lot of time in the trees. And then when I was 7, my dad had his first season of mania, and he quit his job and never slept and kind of thought he could save the world. And that summer, my mom broke her leg. She was a stay-at-home mom up until that point. So you can imagine when your dad is bipolar and your mom has a broken femur, life at home is pretty chaotic with 3 little girls. I was the oldest. And so I really felt like these trees were my family, and it was really where I went to kind of escape the world and be alone and be in a state of peace, as much as I could find it. And then we kind of gave up on being in Washington, so isolated from our family. So my mom decided we would move in with my grandparents in Tulsa. And we lived there for 6 months. My dad got a job at Kmart. We kind of started over. But my grandparents in their backyard had this really beautiful leatherwood tree. And it had these really big, thick, sprawling branches. And suddenly it was my new best friend. And I spent so much time up there, just escaping my problems and befriending this little tree and kind of getting to know that space for myself. And it was really my own space. My little sisters weren't really big enough to climb trees yet. And it really became my safe space. But eventually we got on our feet and we moved out. And one day we went to visit my grandma like we did every weekend. And I kind of ran through the house like, hi, Grandma, hi, Grandpa. And I opened the back door to the backyard. And kind of before anybody could really stop me, I was looking at the stump where they had taken out this tree. And I was heartbroken. I sat on that stump and cried. In my mind, it was a couple of hours, but I'm sure it was like 15 minutes. My dad kind of came out and tried to comfort me. And there was some gut feeling that I had that day. And the way that I articulate it now is I think I became determined to never do to creation what I had seen my family do to my friend. And that has really shaped my journey, even in years when it's been more in the back of my mind. The story has really been formative for me. So fast forward to 2007, I was graduating college and this movie came out, An Inconvenient Truth. And I couldn't get any of my friends and family to watch it because the narrator was Al Gore. But I really soaked it all in and did a lot of research afterwards kind of for myself. I did a presentation to my youth group where I was interning about saving the planet, and just really started to dive in at that point to what this could look like in my own life. This graph is the kind of hockey stick graph that they kind of reference in the movie, but can you see my arrow, or I don't know?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. So this kind of line where carbon dioxide, and then this extension is carbon dioxide equivalents, is just far above the natural kind of cycle. You can see some ice ages, here is ice age, here's an ice age, here's an ice age. And carbon and temperature operate in this kind of feedback loop that eventually they become, similar. They follow similar patterns over time. And so this kind of thing really just freaked me out and also changed my life at the same time. So when my husband got married, we decided we were going to do everything that we could to live a small carbon footprint as we could. So we started we became humane meat eaters, and we would only eat meat that we had met and could be assured that it was being good for the planet. It's a long story, but basically, cows raised well restore the earth, and cows raised in really terrible confined conditions really degrade the earth. So we kind of became friends with a lot of farmers, took a lot of tours of a lot of farms, and we became vegetarians when we were eating out because most restaurants don't tell you where the meat comes from. And that worked well for a long time. We became missionaries for 4 years in Poland and in England, and then we moved home. And we're kind of reconfronted with the consumption of the US and decided we need to figure out a way to live simply. So we found this Airstream. It was 204 square feet on the inside, and we gutted it and we renovated it. That's the couch. Bathroom, kitchen, 12 feet of counter space. I'm very proud of that. Bedroom. This is kind of the 2 years later picture, but we lived there for almost two years and 3 months. And we lived behind, you can kind of see the corner of the house there, but we lived behind some neighbors who let us basically rent a parking spot on their land. And it was just an exploration in our carbon footprint reduction and to see how kind of low we could go. And we moved from there. Actually, we purchased that property and left the Airstream where it is. And we got chickens. That's a whole long story, and I love them very much. And they're just the most adorable creatures on the planet. We can talk about that later if you want. So we bought the house, we bought the property, we left the Airstream, and we wanted housemates. We wanted as many housemates as we could because we felt like that would decrease our individual influence on the planet if we could share as many things as possible. And, this leads to a lot of things like sharing appliances, sharing washer and dryer. We share a mower with our neighbors, and just trying to figure out how we can live with as little stuff and impact as possible. And then a few years ago, I started learning about trash. I hadn't had a huge interest in trash. I'd been doing some things to reduce my trash, but graphics like this that talk about how long things take to decompose really opened my eyes to a problem that I hadn't really seen before. And so I decided to do a 30-day challenge. I was going to reduce my carbon footprint and my trash use as much as possible. It was a zero waste challenge. I was shooting for zero. Obviously, I didn't get there, but we'll talk about that. So I started making my own toothpaste. I was already using bamboo toothbrushes. I replaced my plastic dish brush with a compostable dish brush that had a wooden handle. This is the first time I ate out. I went to a salad bar and I filled up my own container and I kind of used my own utensils on the road, which was very satisfying, but maybe a little too ego inflating at the same time. This is a packed lunch that I ate at the park one day. I made a lot of my own things. I made my own orange juice and almond milk and raspberry jam, and just kind of try to experiment with ways that I could reduce how much plastic I was recycling and throwing away, all that kind of stuff. This is a Japanese reusable Q-tip. I will admit, I have never used this. It came in the mail and just absolutely freaked me out. I could not bring myself to use it. I thought maybe it was because it was too thin and long and skinny, and so I bought a second one that was much fatter, and I still haven't used that one. So if you would like to reduce your Q-tip use, I have 2 mint condition Japanese stainless steel Q-tips I would be happy to send you in the mail. And then I started buying things without packaging. So that included things like soap, especially at the farmer's market, baked goods where I could use my own homemade kind of cloth bag or cloth napkin to grab them and check out. I shopped in bulk bins, which is much harder now because a lot of stores have put their bulk bins kind of on hold because of the pandemic. So that's interesting. This is kind of a typical grocery shopping day. I would put things in produce bags that I'd made or bulk bin bags that I'd made. That sticker is off the oranges in there. You know, you can kind of see some plastic here. I bought some greens. This is a week of shopping. This is the very much Instagram version, but all this to say that it was hard. I went to like 4 different stores to try to find as much as I could without packaging. I did end up with very little waste, just a receipt and a bunch of produce stickers, but it was a huge challenge. And it took me a long time to find more sustainable ways of doing this kind of shopping. This is the most helpful thing that came out of the challenge for me. It was a car kit because I was constantly finding myself at different places and not having the reusable things that I needed to make it happen. So coffee cup, coffee, iced coffee, you know, that's a jar for whatever. This is water bottle, takeout container, cloth napkins, and bulk bin bags, canvas bag, all that kind of stuff. I've even used the crate to like, when I went to the plant shop and got carried away, I put all my plants in the crate to check out. But yeah, so just having things with me in my car. Oklahoma City is very car based. It's very hard to get places without a car because it's so spread out. And so this has helped like get me out of a lot of jams. This is a week of trash from week 1. And you can see a lot of different things in there coffee bags still is a tough one unless you go straight to a roaster and ask for it in your jar. Which I have done, but it's kind of a lot of work. And yeah, so that's week 1. This is week 3. I got sick. I used a bunch of vitamin C packets. People offered me a Starburst and I just grabbed it. I got a gift card that week. This is a paper towel that I accidentally grabbed in the bathroom because it's just an instinct to grab paper towels. I did recycle that. The rest of this I didn't recycle because it's not recyclable in my area. So yeah, I ended up creating about 1 Walmart-sized bag of trash that weighed approximately 2.5 pounds over the course of 30 days. So it wasn't zero waste, but it really taught me a lot about the systems in my area. And it was very, very eye-opening. And really what I think it gave me was a better, more equipped mindset to work on this stuff. A few quotes that stood out to me from my journey. It's only 1 plastic straw, said 8 billion people, which is a funny quote. I don't even remember where it's from, but, you know, 8 billion people don't have access to plastic straws. So it's kind of a little bit misleading, but every plastic toothbrush you've ever used is still on the planet somewhere. Toothbrushes are one of those things that are almost impossible to recycle. Most of them last up to 450 years in a landfill. So no matter how you've disposed of your toothbrush, it's probably still around in a very similar form to when you originally threw it away. These were found on the beach. 91% of plastic isn't recycled. A lot of that has to do with the way recycling works. And that's a huge long story. We can talk about that. There's a lot behind that, actually. And it's things like this. Plastics pile up as China refuses to take the West recycling. A lot of what we were doing with recycling was just shipping it out. Like we would collect it, sometimes even clean it, sometimes even process it a little more than that. But 9 times out of 10, it was getting shipped to China or other Asian countries. The byproducts of this has been a lot of kind of neglect of plastic recycling, companies just shipping it to some, East Asian port and then leaving it there. Abandoned recycling is a big problem. So when you recycle something, when you throw something into the recycling, it doesn't always get recycled. In fact, more than often than not, it doesn't get recycled. One study 2 years ago found microplastics in human poop. And it's funny because it says in a first, as if this is the first time they've been found. But no, actually, this is the first study that exclusively set out to study plastic in guts. They had 20 people from around the world in the study, and every single one had microplastics in their guts. So when we have these problems with trash, it doesn't just affect the environment as if that's something separate from us, but it also really affects us as well. This is about being vegetarian because it really matters where you get your meat. I talked about that earlier, and we can talk about that more if you want to. This is a third world country that has received much of our garbage, and these are trash pickers. I actually used to know the name of this little boy, but I don't off the top of my head now. But this is their job. I mean, they have taken what we have thrown away and are trying to figure out how to survive off of it. So it's really so tragic that land has been treated like this and that people are having to, yeah, wow. The New York Times actually did a story on this little boy, which I could find if you want, but it was gut-wrenching, really. And it affects the ocean where we get our seafood. It affects land. This is Oregon on fire from last week. This is actually a Fox News GIF. But yeah, it affects more than just context. It is really about us and who we are and how we're living, how the poor are living. Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reduce or reverse global warming, is a book that I highly recommend. 1,700 scientists and scientific fellows put together a list of the 100 most important solutions to climate change, and then over the course of several years, put them through an algorithm that ranked them according to effectiveness. So the solutions in Drawdown are ranked according to their importance in the sort of move to reverse global warming. What I have found, though, most inspiring about this work is the editor himself, Paul Hawken, is known for kind of saying, we need to stop seeing climate change as a curse and start seeing it as an opportunity, because every single one of the solutions in Drawdown would make a more just and peaceful and fertile society than we have now. And we would want to do this even if there weren't climate change, but climate change is what is making it so urgent to get this done. And this project is not just for the planet, it's for the humans on the planet to live in a more just and peaceful world. His view, although he's not Christian, he's Buddhist, is that this is kind of the we would say the kingdom coming, but that's not quite how he says it. Anyway, if you can find an interview with him or a podcast with him, very, very inspiring stuff. Probably the most Christian speeches that I've heard from a non-Christian. So this is the kind of thing that it gives you solutions by rank. Some of these are really interesting and surprising. Reduce food waste is very high on the list. Educating girls is very high on the list, and they give you all sorts of reasons for why that would be the case. Rooftop solar, solar farms, all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of the things that you would expect plus things that you wouldn't expect. Household recycling's in there, number 55. Wind energy is on there. LED lighting in household is on there. Household water saving is on there. So it's really a lot of varied solutions. 30 of the solutions are individual behavior based, and 70 of the solutions are more systemic. So either governments would need to get involved or corporations need to be more involved. But that's a wide variety of things that we can and should be both doing and advocating for. So why churches should care? Why churches should care about the environment? Number one, God cares. This is the kind of depiction of Genesis 1 that Brent mentioned earlier. But creation is woven throughout Scripture. I even made a few notes so I wouldn't kind of mess up this part. But oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. So our call as humans is to be caretakers and stewards. Yeah, actually, you know what? We'll talk about that more here in just a second. But then the second thing I want to say is that the poor and impoverished among us are most affected by climate change and environmental destruction. So an estimated 2.5 billion people in the world are smallholder farmers and subsistence farmers, and they rely on consistent weather patterns, and they often don't have access to supplemental irrigation or crop insurance, the kind of things that bigger farms might have access to. But not only that, environmental disasters have been known to cause more hunger and more refugees worldwide. Just as crops fail, it doesn't only affect the smallholder farmer, but it also affects the people that they're feeding. By 2050, there will be an estimated 200 million more climate change refugees, people that are trying to escape disasters so bad they do not feel that they can recover personally. So what churches can do. This is the thing that people are asking me about all the time. And for me, it comes down to kind of three things: preaching, evaluating, and advocating. So preaching seems pretty obvious. We do it quite a bit in the average church. I would say revelation-wise, we can talk about how God is making all things new and not all new things. That's kind of our tagline at OKC First. For the kind of project of the kingdom and what is God doing, and it's a restoration of all of creation. But we can also kind of see creation as part of the texts that we regularly preach. The earth is mentioned over 700 times in the Bible, and that's just the literal earth. But there's also so many stories that take place outside, or they're specifically about agriculture. And we can recognize that agriculture in Scripture is often a way of caring for the earth or caring for people and our neighbors. And we could talk about a lot of examples of that. But one that I like in particular is Jesus calming the storm in the Synoptic Gospels. You know, we can kind of draw a lot of different morals out of this story, perhaps, but one that I really like the angle of is how well creation obeys Jesus. And why does creation obey Jesus so quickly? Is it because maybe creation in this story trusts Jesus implicitly, knows Jesus's voice? What are the kind of sensations there that this storm is feeling and hearing from their creator, embodied in this story as Jesus? I think there are ways that we can tell so many biblical stories by looking for the ways that God interacts with creation and creation responds. For me, that has been a really powerful lens, and I use it so often because so many of these stories interact with creation in really powerful ways. The second thing is evaluate. Evaluate practical things that your church can do on site. So I'm just going to give you a few examples. And for me, they kind of fall into a couple different categories. And the first being use less stuff. So use less water, use less energy, use less styrofoam. Find ways to reduce what your church needs and uses on a regular basis. I will tell you at OKC First, we switched to wind energy by checking a little box on our bill. And we were shocked at how little it added to our electric bill. I think it ended up being like 4% or something. And it was something that we could figure out. We could figure out how to do that. And if we couldn't figure it out, we had a plan to kind of ask our congregation to consider being a part of that initiative. But so many utilities in the nation offer kind of alternative energy options, and they often don't add as much to the bill as you might think. So just using less. But then the second thing I would say is to treat your land as sacred. So Most churches think of their property in one of three ways, and it's kind of based on human use. And I would say that it's parking, play, and programming. So you can see at OKC First, this is our city's easement. Whoops. This is our property line here. But everything besides this city's easement is completely devoted to parking or programming or play. Believe it or not, these two little bitty lawns right here are the lawns that we use for most of our like VBS games and all that kind of thing outside, and sometimes the front lawn if we can get it kind of roped off. But yeah, so to try to think about your property beyond those three kind of human uses of parking, play, and programming. And so one example I wanted to give you of this is thinking of this extra land instead of like wasted space or unused space. So this median here and this little patch inside the handicapped ramp are ways that we are trying to kind of convert these spaces into wildlife habitat and just trying to figure out what it means to treat even little patches on our property as sacred. A lot of people don't know about certified wildlife habitats or certified butterfly gardens, but most of these certification processes require less than 100 square feet minimum or require 100 square feet minimum. So as an example, this median here is 250 square feet. So our goal is to convert this to certified wildlife habitat and kind of include this patch that we're already working on in the application, and then put signs up, let people know, like, this is what we're trying to do. This is where we're trying to go. We're trying to care about our land and treat it as sacred in the best ways that we can. And then the third thing on this is considering our lawn. So a lot of churches, okay, maybe that's not fair, but many churches, let's say, don't think too much about their lawn, especially if they have a lawn service that is taking care of it. Maybe somebody in the church owns a lawn service and they're taking care of it. But we could ask, like, what chemicals are you using on your lawn? Or what chemicals is your lawn company using on your lawn? Is your lawn an invasive species like Bermuda grass? If so, maybe every year when your lawn company reseeds for you or overseeds for you, they could choose something more sustainable. Like this is a native buffalo grass lawn, and it requires less mowing and less water because it is native to North America and Mexico. So finding ways to care for our literal lawn square footage in ways that are more native or organic, instead of having invasive species or chemicals leaching into the environment around our churches, we can take better care of those things. But then the third thing is to advocate. And I think everybody thinks that advocate, well, not everybody. A lot of people, when they picture advocating, they're thinking of something like this, something present and maybe a little sketchy for a church to engage in. There's a lot of hesitancy surrounding things like this. This is a climate strike that took place in Oklahoma City. But there's a lot of things that we can do as clergy to advocate or as churches to advocate that don't necessarily have to be a physical presence at something that maybe makes you as a pastor feel uncomfortable. And that would be to work with your Senate representatives, or there's also a bipartisan House caucus on climate solutions, and just try to understand what are they trying to accomplish? How might your church appreciate that and send them encouragement? You don't even need to necessarily advocate for this or that or the other, but just encourage the people that are doing what you think God would have us do on earth as it is in heaven. The second thing I would say that is like less political, this is Parks and Rec, if you are not familiar, but to kind of ask, who are the landowners in your city? Who owns the most property in your area? In Oklahoma City, it's Parks and Rec. Our Parks and Rec department owns more acreage than anybody else. In your area, it might be agricultural institutions or golf courses, depending on where you are. But try to find those people and ask, what chemicals are they using on their lawns? How might they be more sustainable? How might you encourage them in the sustainable things they're already trying? A lot of people want to do something like this but aren't sure where to start. And I recommend just having a conversation. Have a conversation with the most influential kind of landowners in your area, because it's great for your church, you know, with 1 acre or half an acre to change your practices. But imagine if your Parks and Rec department changed their practices, and that would have a huge impact. And then the last thing I would say on that is businesses, in my mind, have the most opportunity to impact climate change. So you can ask yourself, who in my congregation is involved in a business? Maybe they own a lawn service. Imagine if one lawn service changed all of their kind of options to organic or native or natural, or if they offered an option, that would change so many more acres of lawn than just your church changing what they do through their lawn company, if your church uses a lawn company. I'm sure a lot of churches don't. But if you know somebody that goes golfing, or if you know somebody that owns the local golf course, a golf course is a huge amount of land. And if we can advocate for them to have more sustainable practices, that would also have a big impact. So for me, getting one institution like Southern Nazarene University or a golf course or our lawn service at the church to have more sustainable practices going on makes a way bigger impact than just me kind of doing it by myself. I think a lot of environmental advocates think of business as the enemy, or even like businesses like golf courses as the enemy, because they often do have such unsustainable practices. But we've got to kind of change that mindset. I think businesses are full of people who maybe would want to do the right thing, or could be convinced that it's good for their business to do the right thing. So that's the kind of advocacy that I work alongside the business community. And I think it's actually often much more effective than what I could be doing on my own. You know, even if I was just trying to get all my neighbors to switch their lawn care, having one lawn company or 2 lawn companies switch their lawn care makes a much bigger difference. So yes, just lastly, closing with a little snippet from Romans 8, that the creation is waiting with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. And I think this is so true, maybe now more than ever, that creation is waiting for us to come into our own and to fulfill our calling as bringers and participation of the kingdom coming on earth as it is in heaven. So I would love to hear from you guys if you have ideas about other things that we could be doing, because I know there's way, way more than I can cover in just this little 25 minutes. So yeah.
Thanks, Brit. Really good. I love the ways in which there are a lot of steps here. And obviously for you as a Christian, as a pastor, there's a theological bent to this. And I would say a lot of folks who aren't Christians still lean this way because that's what I think is right. And I think the West, we can celebrate that intuition folks have is good there. So questions, comments along the way. I guess I would hope that you all heard it's not all or nothing, but there are ways in which to be thoughtful, both in our homes and in our churches and in our community. Questions or comments for Brit? We're all in. We're all vegetarians. That's it.
Rich, that was brilliant. Very well integrated and great presentation. Just a couple of reflections. You know, we are a first and third world combination here in South Africa. Your percentage that you quoted there, that 91% of plastics are not recycled. Yeah, here we have a strange anomaly in that we have economic refugees from surrounding countries, and they're predominantly males who operate recycling carts. And they literally go through the household garbage and business, where they can access that, and then take it to recycling centers, which is encouraging because in a way it does reduce, those kinds of pollutants in our environs here. And then Cheryl reminded me when we first lived back here, we shared a house, so we had a housemate with a longtime friend of Cheryl's from her high school days, businesswoman, and their household and division did recycle in 3 different ways. So again, that was very commendable. A company operated that. So it was good to see. And then in building codes here in South Africa, new buildings are required to be green. They have to go with very strict protocols, reduction of, energy usage, efficiency, and the like. So it's interesting. And those are a couple of things that go on. I was thinking today as we drove a little ways by some informal settlements, and then immediately you notice, the fact that there is no garbage collection in those communities. There is no recycling really that goes on. So it is tended to be dumped. And I was thinking about that, where can concerned citizens come alongside a community like that and provide some kind of means or incentive, again, to assist in addressing that issue. So just a couple of thoughts and comments more than a question, I guess. But thank you.
That's great. Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. Anybody else? Questions or comments? Or, I think part of the challenge becomes, I'm not sure you have a lot of folks who would resist this. Certainly, and I didn't know you're from Seattle, Brit, but I grew up in Seattle, and kind of the tree hugger mentality of your idolizing and worshiping creation. But I do think in the end, I think the danger becomes that what are you asking of me becomes the issue, and it's all an issue of change. I do think what I appreciate about your comments as a pastor, you're starting out. There are a lot of what I would say are kind of small or minor inconveniences can go a big way, and I think you build from that. How can you then say? And I think doing this as a community, as a pastor or a small group, a Sunday school class, having questions about without anybody getting offended, so how can we as a class? What can we do in our homes? Well, what can we do as a church? And I think you start small, because I'm sure you can't have folks disagree with you about taking care of the earth's all going to burn, but hopefully we move mostly past that. But I do think inviting folks into, I think, small to build. I think a lot of folks, they're easy entrance ramps onto this that I think can then empower folks to say, oh yeah. So my wife, we a couple years ago bought metal straws, right? And we are going to go out somewhere. We never, it's a small thing, right? But we never take straws anywhere or take straws from companies. Or we try to remember, and as I give them to them automatically, you forget to say, don't want any straws. But just small things, I think, are keys to being good stewards. And then just having eyes to see. I think what I appreciate about your comments is a lot of times it's just a failure to see the ways in which in America, and I would also say too, it does feel like there's a little bit of an elitist thing here in that, sometimes I have the space to be able to choose, whereas some folks don't. But I imagine a lot of folks in our congregations do have that space to choose. So it's not me beating up my neighbor because they're not doing it, but to say, how can we in our space encourage each other and find small but then in large ways to be a better steward? Anyway, other comments or thoughts from the group? How would this work to preach a sermon? Again, every context is very unique, from South Africa to Texas to California, Tennessee, and Washington. All unique places. How would this roll?
Brit, I really appreciate what you shared. Coming from a UK perspective, 12 years into this life in America, I can see, obviously it's a bigger country, consumption is huge. And I'm picturing trying to make a Nazarene potluck. Now the pandemic has really saved on paper plates and plastic utensils. So I praise God for that. It's really kind of given us a big deep breath on that front. But I think about the way that my family, we got 4 kids, 1 through 9. So there's certain areas where we can, as a family, like paper towels. Man, we got to have paper towels. It's just a thing right now. But as we go forward, there's things we do. Like we don't buy plastic water bottles. I haven't bought plastic water bottles for my family since pre-kids, 2008, 2009. We don't do that. We use reusable bottles. But I think what I struggle with most is how this is a theological issue. It's not just, hey, we got to save our planet. I don't know if you ever read, but Colin Gunton at one time presented the did 3 lectures at NTC. And the published book, I believe, is called Christ and Creation. I was trying to grab it before we did this session this morning. I think I've lost my copy, so that's just great. But in that, he really captures perfectly this idea that when Christ came to redeem, it wasn't just us, it was all of creation. And when you start to think theologically about, yes, there's the vertical, but there's also the horizontal impact. This isn't like an optional extra. It's a bit like holiness. It's not an optional add-on to your salvation. It is your responsibility. It's part of soteriology that we participate in the redeeming of creation. And so I'm sitting here kind of starting to get fired up and frustrated, thinking, well, why am I so afraid to really hammer this home when it's just truth? It's theologically sound. But as Brent says, I lived in Washington for 3.5 years, just moved here in March, down to California again. And yeah, trees are like sacred. You don't go around whacking down trees. You got to be careful. You got to talk to the right people. I think we got to find a balance, but I like your idea about Parks and Rec, and I'm actually going to see if I can make some contacts there and see if there's something we can do, cleaning up a park, doing whatever. One of the things our church does monthly, I didn't institute this, but they collect recyclables, aluminium or aluminum, and plastic once a month, and all the proceeds go to the Jesus Film. This church has raised thousands of dollars. I'm talking, I think the Held Fund has like $8,000 in it for Jesus Film equipment, all because people bring their recycling. And it's a minor inconvenience because one room gets taken over by plastic bags full of recyclables. But man, someone's using that as a ministry. Praise God. So just some thoughts.
I love that. Thanks for sharing those.
Yeah, I do think, to me, the proper reading, and as well as how you translate the Hebrew word, you shall have dominion over the earth or stewardship. I think theologically we'll be held accountable as humans for how the earth is going. I think that means it's not our earth. We are creatures, and God said, you shall steward it. And I think it's, so theologically, it's an accountability piece that God says, how are you doing with my creation? And so I agree with you, Colin, essentially that, theologically, and that's where I think with people, I think that the key is not having a hard binary, are you in or out, but inviting folks into it theologically, then saying, let's start small. And then once you start small, I'm convinced the Spirit and their own passion will find ways in which they can amp it up. But I think as a church and community, you can say, what does it mean that we're going to be a greener church? And then find ways both collectively and individually, and then connect it to how our Christian stewardship and our holiness is tied here with loving, this is Brit's point, not only loving creation, but loving the other. That's the point of that book, I think you said, Brit. It's not just simply the earth being better, but doing this is taking care of other human beings. And that's where it's hard to say no to that. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, so the one comment you made that just really fired up my imagination was when you talked about how the Bible speaks about the earth, and then you went on, you said, so why did the wind and the waves obey Jesus? Because I'm teaching at NTC, the Synoptic Gospels. So I'm kind of living in all of those stories right now and thinking about why each of those gospel writers wrote to their particular community, blah, blah. Anyway, I got to, the way you phrased that just really, because the response was the disciples said, wow, even the wind and the waves obey him. But I've never thought about the fact, ask the next question. Why would they? Because they recognized his voice. Hello. So I can't wait to go back and teach next week and say, ask my students the question, why do you think Jesus had that kind of authority? Because it's the same thing as a mother when I would say things to my children. it came from with a voice of authority and a little bit of fear. If you ask Roland will tell you, oh, Mom, all the kids at Omaha Central Church really were scared of you. Not such a positive thing. But anyway, I love that because I'm thinking as I steward it and as I think about miracles, the miracle of climate change, of actually stepping into that, is to then listen to that voice, which is the voice of the creator. So anyway, you got my imagination going. Thanks so much.
It's great. Thanks.
Really good stuff. Yeah. Christ as the word of God. Now we got to be careful of the Jewish texts, but certainly First Peter would affirm that, Son was the word of God who created. And so I think there's a lot you can do with that theologically for sure. Well, the noon hour or 1 o'clock hour or 2 o'clock hour, no matter where you are, has told. And so, Brit, thank you so much. One final question or comment for anybody before we go? Don't want to cut
one thing I just thought of something.
Yeah, great.
Growing up in Northern Ireland, I didn't go to church frequently. I was sent to caravan and Sunday school because it was free babysitting. I'm not saying anything my mother wouldn't say, but they're regretting it now because I'm the only believer in the whole family, and look what happened to me. So we would have harvest services, harvest celebrations every autumn, and it still happens today in the UK. People bring vegetables, sometimes they'll bring canned goods, and there'll be somewhere that they are ultimately going to distribute those resources for people to use them wisely. And I was thinking of the song, All Things Bright and Beautiful. We need to sing that more often. And just maybe the idea of harvest, the idea of sowing and reaping might be one of the means by getting into this dialogue and increasing it so that people become increasingly aware. For me here in Reading, this is a really crazy agricultural part of California. And so it wouldn't be hard to get into that kind of sustainable, like how can we provide for ourselves, maybe have a community garden. Our church property is ridiculous. It's huge. We got a $1.3 million parking lot that all kinds of people use. So there's opportunities there that we could tap into, I think.
I just want to say one more thing too. Thanks, Colin. That's great. Love that hymn. Howie Buffett. Have you read his book, 40 Chances? So he's the son of Warren Buffett, and he's a farmer. What a great book. Anyway, and he talks, it's impacting on the world as far as food and food insecurity. So kind of a fun book to read. And you know what, when you talked about the guy that you said was, let's see, the book that you recommended, and you said he was Buddhist.
Colin. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The Drawdown book.
Paul Hawken.
Yeah. It sounds a little bit like a theologian out of the University of Cape Town who called a communist who was one of the leaders of the struggle. He said, I think you are an unbelieving believer. So anyway, kind of a different way to look at it.
Yeah. Good stewards.
One comment that we didn't go into the food issue, of course, y'all know Wendell Berry's work, and I was talking about Colin about the way in which in North America, at least, we've lost our connection to the land. And I think if you think about harvest, and I think even in America, I mean, even in Nampa, Idaho, where I live, very agricultural. Even folks can live in this town and still be very disconnected from the land, and the importance of that is lost. And I think in one of the blessings and curses of technology and the way in which we mass produce things is that we have, the downside, we've lost connection to the land and all the results of, like it's easy to hurt your neighbor when you never see them. But when you're present to the land, I think you just see things, you're invited to see things differently. So, yeah.
That's true. Yeah. One example I just came to my mind from my time in Washington, there was a person in my congregation whose grandchild literally thought that corn came in a can at all times and didn't know what to do with the cob. And And the same with like carrots, like little carrots in bags. And you laugh initially and then you realize, my goodness, a child can grow up and develop their entire sense of self, everything, and never actually see or discover where something came from. And that's right, you've lost that connection to the land. And I having grown up in a small country, a small island where you could always, on my 6-mile run that I used to take as a teenager and young adult, I would be going through urban, suburban, rural, all in the space of 55 minutes. I would go through every kind of space. You were always that close to the land. I'm aware of cattle, of produce, all those things. And I don't have one big answer for everybody, because if you live in the city, that's probably not going to change too much. But there are ways. There's a documentary my wife has been watching, not me, because I'm not Zac Efron does nothing for me, but my wife's been watching this documentary of his, and he's going to Iceland and all these different places. It's quite interesting. I'll give him that. And one place he visited was London, where they have green rooftops and different options to kind of be sustainable. It's exhausting if you think about trying to do this on your own and in your own realm of influence. And that's why I really like the Parks and Rec idea, and maybe I can find some other versions of that. So thanks, Brit.
Well, thank you, Brit. And I apologize that some of our friends were cut off. I will send a link to this video to them, and they'll yell at me, and I'll apologize. But it's great to have all of you who are here. And Caleb, also, welcome to joining us today. Thanks for joining us. And all of you, thanks for your persistence and not being discouraged by my errant cancellation. So you thought well to ignore my lost ways. But I'll send a link out to everybody with this video, and feel free to share and use it broadly. And Brit, that goes for you too. So we can share this and any way you want to. We'll host it on our site eventually in a month or so, but this is free to all of you to use. So blessings and peace upon you, and may we see God in creation and take care of God's creation as part of God's creation. So blessings on all of you guys. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Oh, and by the way, real quick, I did put the LLL number, lifelong learning number, in the thing. For those of you who want to do that for lifelong learning, it's 57696. For those who want to just do that as part of that Nazarene stuff to can show we're still learning stuff, that's great. And again, you can do that as well. So thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, Dr. Peterson.
Appreciate it, guys. Excellent.